أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق ونودوا أن تلكم الجنة ورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيب قلوبنا السراج المنير المصطفى الأمجد أبا القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه الغر الميامين. أما بعد، يقول الله في المحكم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. There's an interesting article a couple of years ago in the New York Times. They were looking at the role of religion in American society, and they concluded that a majority of Americans actually believe in God. It's actually caught me by surprise. But according to surveys, according to studies, they found that on average, when they ask Americans, do you believe in God? Over 94% of them believe in God or a higher power. So the vast majority of Americans believe in God or a higher power. But what they found is that a growing number of Americans are running away from organized religion, meaning they're not attending churches, they're not attending synagogues, they're not attending mosques or masjids or other sorts of areas. So what they concluded in this article is that the reason that Americans are running away from organized religion is because religion in the eyes of many people is too complicated. Meaning, if you want to connect to God, if you want to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people find that there are too many barriers preventing them from connecting. So what the New York Times was recommending is that we need a Steve Jobs of religion. So all of you know Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, the iPad, all of these other devices. The reason they say that we need a Steve Jobs of religion is because they say, think about it. When you buy a new phone, you don't need a manual to actually know how to use it. You immediately take the phone, then you start touching buttons, and it's intuitive, it's simple. Even a young child knows how to use an iPhone. So you give this phone to a 2-3-year-old child, they start taking pictures intuitively. It's very intuitive. It's something that doesn't need study. And they say, likewise, we need a Steve Jobs of religion. They mean someone who can invent not a new religion, meaning we don't need a new religion, but rather a new way of being religious. Like Mr. Jobs' creation, this new way would be straightforward and unencumbered. And they go on to say that I imagine a religious space that allows one to utter the word God without embarrassment. See, in modern times, many people believe in God, but they feel embarrassed to say that they believe in God. It's embarrassing, if you're intellectual, if you've studied, to say that you believe in God. And part of the reason is many people view the belief in God as being something tribal, something archaic, something cultural. So what the article was saying is we need a Steve Jobs of religion. What I would argue is actually we don't need a Steve Jobs of religion. Actually, the Ahlul Bayt have simplified this religion to such a degree that they make it accessible to the masses. And one of the most important figures in making the religion accessible is Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, salawat. Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, when he was in the court of Al-Ma'mun would invite many people from different backgrounds, Christians, atheists, Zoroastrians, Jews, and he would put Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida in the environment, and he would have him debate with these different backgrounds. And Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida was very effective in that he addressed the challenges of the Christians, the Zoroastrians, the Hindus, the atheists, in a simple, accessible way that allowed people to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a simple way without overcomplicating it. So what I would argue tonight is that we don't really need a Steve Jobs of religion, but in fact Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us 14 ma'soomeen that enable us to connect to Allah in the simplest and the most direct way. Yet unfortunately in modern times, many of us, including the followers of Ahlul Bayt, we overcomplicate things. And by the way, this isn't me saying that the Ahlul Bayt are the connection to enable us to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. It's actually contained in the Quran, and Allama Tabatabai has a beautiful explanation of this. The evidence for this is actually right behind me. You see this mihrab here? You see the ayah that's written on this mihrab? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَإِذَا سَأَلُكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشِدُونَ. So this ayah is an important ayah. Ayah number 186, surah number 2. Why is this an important ayah? This ayah, if you translate it, says, وَإِذَا سَأَلُكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي. And if my servants ask about me, وَإِذَا سَأَلُكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. I am close. فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي. I'll respond to the call of the caller if they call to me. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond to people, but first and foremost they need to call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يُرْشِدُونَ. So let them follow me, فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي, and let them believe in me, لَعَلَّهُمْ يُرْشِدُونَ, so that they may be guided. Now why is this an important ayah? According to Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan, if you look at this ayah, you break it down to its fundamental components, human beings are referred in this ayah 7 times. 7 times. وَإِذَا سَأَلُكَ, for example, the first reference, سَأَلُكَ عِبَادِي, عِبَاد, عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ again referring to the abd, al-da'i again referring to the abd, إِذَا دَعَانِي again the abd, فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُ لِي, يَسْتَجِيبُ, that's the abd again, وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي, that's the abd again, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشِدُونَ. 7 times the abd is referred to. Now by contrast, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah is also referred to 7 times, right? 7 times Allah is referred to. So what do you get when you add 7 plus 7? 14. Allama Tabatabai is saying that this is one of the subtle symbols demonstrating that in order to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need the guidance of the 14 ma'soomeen. You see, it's a symbolic interpretation, and I think it's a beautiful interpretation of this particular ayah, 186, surah number 2. So, tonight we have a brief session because I have to go to the airport. At 10, my flight is at 10:30. But what I hope to achieve here tonight is 2 basic objectives. First, to demonstrate that in modern times we don't need a Steve Jobs of religion, but in fact, the Quran is extremely accessible. We've just overcomplicated it. And number 2, I want to discuss the story, one of the most important stories of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida and his interaction with the atheist. What did Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida discuss with the atheist? And how did Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida debate with the atheist? And how did Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida use logic to overturn some of the assumptions of the atheist? So we'll discuss those, but first please recite the loud salawat. The first thing that we need to understand as Muslims is that Islam isn't a religion. Oftentimes we group Islam with the other religions of the world. We say, for example, Judaism is a religion, Christianity is a religion. It's actually not true. Allah never refers to Islam as a religion in the Quran. The closest word to religion in the Arabic language is a word like madhab or millah or tariqa, for example. But Allah never refers to Islam as religion. Allah doesn't say inna al-madhab inda Allah al-Islam, or inna al-aqidah inda Allah al-Islam, or inna al-millah inda Allah al-Islam. Uses a very different word. Inna al-dina inda Allah al-Islam. Deen is a very different word from religion. In fact, just to give you an idea of what deen means, deen is almost like a more comprehensive system. religion implies something that's man-made. It's a religious system. People say that this is a religion. It's a man-made thing. Deen, however, it's much more universal and much more comprehensive. It's a universal system. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, in the Quran, فَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله إن ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. Here the word deen essentially means a system, a universal system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word deen in numerous instances. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Point is that deen is very different from religion. We don't have much time, but I want you to appreciate that oftentimes people mistranslate the word religion as meaning deen, but deen actually means something much more comprehensive. Religion implies like a philosophy, a system of belief, whereas deen is something much more universal. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. This act of tasbih is performed by everything in the heavens and on the earth. Meaning deen is encompassing of every creation on earth. It's not something that's a philosophy that's created or an adherence system, but rather it's a universal system. Now, interestingly, when we look at the deen of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a very important point, that humans are created on a foundation of belief. فَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. So, here the concept of fitrah is very unique in Islam. The Islamic system is one that uniquely believes in this concept of fitrah. Fitrah meaning that every human being is created not as a blank slate, but they're created believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was stated over 1400 years ago. In fact, recent evidence suggests that this is very true. There's a woman over at Boston University. Her name is Deborah Kellerman. And what she does is she studies childhood psychology. And what she finds is that children, from the time that they're born up until around the age of 9, when you ask them where things come from, they always automatically say that they've come from God or from a higher power, irrespective of whether these children are born in an atheist household, in a non-believing household, or in a believing household. So Deborah Kellerman, among many other modern psychologists, have found that children are born believing in a higher power. So if you ask a child, for example, where did the tree come from? The child's natural answer of where the tree came from is they'll say it came from a God, or they'll say whatever word they use to demonstrate a higher power. A child naturally doesn't say, well, this tree just came out of nothing, or this tree came out of evolution. And this idea is called the intuitive thesis. The point being that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created mankind on a foundation of belief. So this is the Islamic idea, that humans weren't created as a blank system, but rather they were created on a foundation of belief. So meaning our human psychology is dependent on connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the default system that we were created on. So if you really want to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, you need to connect to your own self, you see. That's one of the fundamental, foundations of Islam. Rather than needing a Steve Jobs of religion, first and foremost, what we need to do is really reconnect to our own selves, because it's by connecting to ourselves that we connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat. So, what are the reasons that people don't connect to themselves, and how can we overcome some of these challenges? If you look at some of the reasons that people don't connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, again, I go back to this New York Times article saying, well, why aren't people connecting to religion? Why do they believe God, but they don't, feel religious? They say one of the main reasons, and here again, I'm quoting directly from this article. They say, put bluntly, God is not a lot of fun these days. Many of us don't view religion so generously. All we see is an angry God. You see, oftentimes if you type in the word God into Google, you'll see some very strange images. You'll see, the image of God as being this man in the clouds. That's an image of God. You'll see an image of a God being very angry. So many people associate the image of God or Allah with anger, with fear, with hatred. All we see is an angry God. He's constantly judging and smiting, and so are his followers. No wonder so many Americans love the Dalai Lama. He laughs often and well. You see, one of the reasons that people turn away from God is because they see the representatives of God, or the so-called representatives of God, always angry, always saying you can't do this or you can't do that. And this really, and then they say, well, because this priest or this rabbi or this Maulana didn't smile at me today, I feel very sort of upset. But the main point here is that it's not, you don't connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of a speaker or because of a religious scholar. You connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by first and foremost connecting to yourself, which, there's many tools that have actually been given to us to enable that. Probably the greatest tool that's been given to Muslims is the Dua Joshan al-Kabir, and I'll get into that. But first, please recite aloud salawat. Dua Joshan al-Kabir is a important dua. Many of you know it as we recite it during the month of Ramadan. But if you want to understand human psychology, and if you want to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no better source than Dua Joshan al-Kabir. And unfortunately, we as the followers of Ahlul Bayt, we only recite, if we're lucky, Dua Joshan al-Kabir 3 times during the year, during the 3 nights of Ramadan, and the rest of the year we leave it aside, right? And this is unfortunate, because if you look at the writings of the scholars of Ahlul Bayt, Sheikh Abbas Qummi, one of the great scholars, says that he has not found any evidence for Dua Joshan al-Kabir to only be recited during Ramadan. Dua Joshan al-Kabir, if you want to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no greater dua than Dua Joshan al-Kabir. And more importantly, if you want to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and overcome these stereotypes or these images of God being angry, there is no better dua than Dua Joshan al-Kabir. And Dua Joshan al-Kabir is an important dua because it was actually transmitted to us by the father of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, Imam Musa al-Kadhim. He's the one that's narrated Dua Joshan al-Kabir to the followers of Islam via the Prophet and via the angel Jibreel. Now, why do I mention Dua Joshan al-Kabir? Dua Joshan al-Kabir is an important dua, but unfortunately many of us as followers of Ahlul Bayt, we only recite it during the 3 nights of Ramadan. And it's unfortunate. One year I was leading Salat al-Jum'ah, and I was telling this to Brother Mehdi earlier this morning. I was leading Salat al-Jum'ah in Philadelphia to some of the brothers at the University of Pennsylvania. We used to have Salat al-Jum'ah every Friday. And one week during the month of Ramadan, I was telling them about Dua Joshan al-Kabir, and some of the Turkish Sunni brothers came up afterwards, and one of them was wearing a chain, and the chain had the small sort of amulet, the small book, and he came up to me and he said, brother, in Turkey we recite Dua Joshan al-Kabir all year long, not just during Ramadan. And I said, wow, subhanAllah, well, how did you learn about Dua Joshan al-Kabir? And he told me that there was a Turkish scholar, very famous man, named Said Nursi. Said Nursi, according to the Turkish brothers and sisters, was called Badi'ul Zaman, meaning the glory of the ages. And he was the one that popularized Dua Joshan al-Kabir in Turkey during the time of Kemal Ataturk. So many Turkish people had no clue about Dua Joshan al-Kabir, but then when Said Nursi started telling them about it, many of them started reciting Dua Joshan al-Kabir, and it became a very popular dua. And in fact, Said Nursi himself says that reciting Dua Joshan al-Kabir, he thinks by his account, saved him from death at least 20 times. This is a Sunni scholar, great Sunni scholar, Sa'id Nursi, saying that he recited Dua Joshan al-Kabir all the time, and it was at least saved 20 times. Now, why do I mention this? Again, one of the problems in modern society, the reason that people don't connect to God, is they have a very simplistic concept of God. When they think of God, they think of this man floating in the clouds, a man with a long white beard. When many of you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a'udhu billah, you associate Allah with some very simplistic images of, oh, will Allah punish me if I do this? Or will Allah do this if I do this? We always think of Allah as being a punisher. But in fact, according to Dua Joshan al-Kabir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond human comprehension. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond simple terminology. And if you truly want to understand Allah, you need to first and foremost understand your own limitations, and secondly, understand the beauty and the characteristics of Dua Joshan al-Kabir and the Asma Allah al-Husna. Salawat. We can spend an entire month on Dua Joshan al-Kabir. I bring this up because it's one of the important du'as that was transmitted to us by Imam Musa al-Kadhim and Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. And I would say that the solutions in Dua Joshan al-Kabir really address many of the situations that people have today. They don't connect to God because it's an overly simplistic idea. But I think the step one to connecting to Allah is understanding the nature of Allah. Which brings us in the final few minutes to Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha was really fantastic in the way that he debated with the atheists and people of other backgrounds. As I mentioned, and Ma'mun on a regular basis would have these huge assemblies where he would bring people to debate with Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. And the purpose of this was to enable Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha to stumble, to enable Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha to make a mistake, so that then Al-Ma'mun would say, see, this is your Imam. He can't even answer a simple question from the Zoroastrians or the Christians or the Jews. Ma'mun had a very specific strategy. He gave this platform to Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha with the aim of making Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha stumble and fail. But Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha was always very elegant in his responses. So anyway, one time, atheists came to Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha and said, what and where is your Lord? This is the question that he asked Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. What and where is your Lord? Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha responded to the atheists. He said, don't use human terms when you talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the atheist said, well, what do you mean? Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha said, what and where are things that are limited to human conceptions of time and place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above time and place. So then Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha was asked by the atheist. The atheist asked Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. So he said, well, what's your evidence for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the atheist asked, well, how can you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you can't see Him? If you can't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can you believe in Him? Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha said, your inability to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prevented you from believing in Allah. My inability to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown me the limitations of my own ability. You see? So Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha flipped the script. He said, my inability to see is because of my own limitations as a human being. Just because we don't see something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And in fact, it's really interesting that this is the answer that Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha gave to the atheist. Because if you look at our own modern world, the majority of our own modern world is actually invisible to us. The 2011 Nobel Prize was won for a concept called dark matter and dark energy. So what is dark matter and dark energy? If you take every atom on the universe, and atoms are things that can be measured, atoms are things that can be weighed. So for example, this chair is made out of atoms, this microphone is made out of atoms, the lights are made out of atoms, the trees are made out of atoms, the stars, the planets, the ocean, All of these things are made out of a fundamental building block called atoms. Atoms are like the Legos of the natural world, right? So if you go to Legoland, you see these little pieces, they make big things. So if you take all of the atoms in the universe, they represent only 4% of the universe. Meaning only 4% of the universe is actually visible to human sights, senses, and measurements. 96% of the universe is completely invisible to us and completely beyond measurement. This component is called dark energy and dark matter. Scientists, astrophysicists, they know that this dark energy and dark matter exists, but they don't have the tools to measure it, you see. So they have the tools to measure atoms, to weigh atoms, but they don't have tools to measure dark matter and dark energy. People won the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics for this discovery of dark matter and dark energy. Getting back to the answer of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida. When the atheists asked him, how can you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you're unable to see Him? Notice Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida's response. He didn't become defensive, but he smiled and he acknowledged his own limitations. He said to the atheists, your inability to see made you a disbeliever in Allah. My inability to see made me appreciate my own limitations, you see. A lot of times we don't appreciate our limitations. We think simply because we can't see that it doesn't exist. If we actually applied that standard to the world that we're living in, 96% of the world, then we'd say, I don't believe in 96% of the universe. And it doesn't matter if you believe or you don't believe, because 96% of the universe is still going to exist. So the final point that I want to say about Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, so then the atheist asked Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, okay, well if you can't see him, what's your evidence for believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the answer of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida was really beautiful. He said, my evidence for the existence of Allah is I reflect on my own creation. And then when I get tired of reflecting on my own creation, the way that I breathe, the way that I walk, the way that I talk, when I get tired of reflecting on my own creation, I reflect on the creation of everything outside of me. The ocean, the stars, everything else. So getting back to this point of needing a modern Steve Jobs of religion, I would say we don't need a modern Steve Jobs of religion. We have the greatest of simplifiers of religion, the greatest of explainers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the examples of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida and others. And just to conclude, I think the point that Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida makes about connecting to Allah by connecting to the creation is a very important point. And oftentimes we think that we only find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the masjid, but in fact Allah is beyond. Allah is everywhere. Allah is everywhere you look. And that's why I really love, when I was talking to Maulana yesterday and the community, this idea of tonight after this masjid, you're going to La Jolla Shores for a bonfire. I mean, this is probably the greatest idea. Whoever came up with that idea, you should, I don't know, maybe during Muharram, give him extra shilazard or something, give him some sweets or something, It's a great idea because the best way to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at His creation. And when you look at how wide the Pacific Ocean is, you immediately appreciate how insignificant you are. This is one ocean. What about the entire universe? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to become followers of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, to be examples for the Muslims and non-Muslims, and to really adhere to the life and example of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida. Again, I apologize for cutting it short. I have to go to the airport. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and to enable us to succeed. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا أصلا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. صلوات.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Astaghfirullah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
One more.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Inshallah, see you in Muharram.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Qasim for coming and enlightening us with his lovely speech. Please recite a loud salawat for him and his family to be in good health and for him to have safe travels.